Hi guys, this is Ajahn Som again, and this part I'm going to talk about folktale and fairy tale. What is a folktale? Well, a folktale is a short story told orally from a generation to the next generation. So a folktale is not just any tales, but it has been passed down, normally orally, so by word of mouth instead of written form, from generation to generation. So they have long tradition, and each area, each country, each culture has its own folktale. Mhm. And the functions of folktale are to reveal everyday life. So when you read a folktale, you know how that character did thing in the past, right? So it shows it's a reflection of the society in the past. Also, it gives some lessons for each stage of life. So with like the same story, when you first read it as a child, you might like it or hate it for some reason. But as you grew up, you look back to that story, you might feel differently. And lastly, to criticize society, traditions, or behaviors. So even folktale, because if its function is to instruct people, then that specific purpose, the way they choose the characters and settings, and the way they determine the fate of that character, that is a kind of criticism to society and traditions also, okay? Also behaviors. For example, if when you read the folk tale and you find that this character, treats another character badly, then maybe in the end there will be some kind of punishment. In Thai soap opera, this is very clear, okay? And in many cases, the characters are animals with human characteristics. So this is like the similarities to fables, that there can be animals in there, and the animals can have human characteristics. Now, that was folktale. Now fairy tale. Fairy tale is part of folk tales, and in this one we call it a subgenre. Genre, a kind of tales, right? Subgenre, a subdivision of folk tales. Okay? And how do we call this folk tale or fairy tale? Well, if that tale has some elements of magic, you can call it a fairy tale. Godmother, pumpkins, dancing mice, could be talking parrots, up to you. And there are many kinds of creatures, see, such as fairy, witch, monster, ogre, goblins, you name it. Lots of fantasy creatures. And of course, this is like the classic one. Classic folktale and fairy tale. The first one is Little Red Riding Hood so the original one, the well-known one, I would say this, is by Charles Perrault. Okay? So, have you read the stories? If you haven't, I suggest you read the story first here in the FAL course book. It's quite lengthy, so make sure you read before you continue reading my next slide, okay? It's a classic one that there's a Little Red Riding Hood, the one we call Little Red Riding Hood, right? She lives with her mother, and one day her mother asks her to take something to her grandmother in the woods. And on the way, she met a wolf, see? And then the wolf wanted to eat the Little Red Riding Hood, so he sped up to the grandmother's house and eat the grandmother and disguise himself as the grandmother, see? And these are the classics, like lines that lots of kids remember from this, because it's it's a set of question and answers that makes them like it's a repetition, but it's also like funny and interesting in a way. See, all the better to hug you. Like, grandmother, what big arms do you have? All the better to hug you with, my dear. Grandmother, what big legs you have. All the better to run with, my child. See? So there's this, what do you call, turns of dialogues, okay? That's quite classic. And in the end, of course, the Little Red Riding Hood needs to ask about the teeth. See? Grandmother, what big teeth you have got. And instead of saying all the better to see with, to hear with, right? He said all the better to eat you up with, see? And then, and saying these words, this wicked wolf fell upon Little Red Riding Hood and ate her all up. See? This, this Charles Perrault version, you might have heard about versions before. So the Tales of Little Red Riding Hood in this version, originally, see, it doesn't end happily at all because Little Red Riding Hood was eaten by the wolf. But there are other versions that has a happy ending, that they introduce another character, the woodcutter, if you have heard of that, that in the end, after the Little Red Riding Hood was eaten, the woodcutter came to help and rescue. He killed the wolf and rescued Little Red Riding Hood and her grandmother. See? So, even the classic one, there are versions of these tales, okay, the folk tales. And that you can even find Little Red Riding Hood in maybe Chinese version or other countries' version. But for this one, okay, because it's a story, as you can see here, it's a story, it's a Blue Fairy book, stories for children. That's why they include the moral part in this here. See, children, especially attractive, well-bred young ladies, should never talk to strangers, for if they should do so, they may well provide dinner for a wolf. I say wolf, but there are various kinds of wolves. There are also those who are charming, quiet, polite, unassuming, complacent, and sweet, who pursue young women at home and in the streets. And unfortunately, it is these gentle wolves who are the most dangerous ones of all. See, you can see the moral here that the author, see, Andrew Lang, who wrote Blue Fairy book here in 1900, you can see that how is it a reflection of society? See, it's retold in 1900 with the added moral that they are trying to teach young women, especially young ladies here, see, that the wolf in the story could symbolize men, okay? Charming, quiet, polite, unassuming men who might prey upon young women at home or in the streets. So don't trust anyone that easily, okay? Okay, so now let's get back to the slides. Okay, so the theme of Little Red Riding Hood, after you've read it, what do you think it is? Could be like, should you keep asking questions with the wolf, or, oh, อาจารย์, Little Red Riding Hood should already see that that is a wolf, not her grandmother, because of these appearances. Who knows? But the theme here means like, what is the main idea of the story, not what happened, okay? It would be strange to say, okay, the theme of the story is Little Red Riding Hood got eaten by a wolf. That's the result of the story, but not like the main idea that the author wants to talk about. The reason this story got told from generation to generation, not just because the result, okay? So what's the theme? The theme could be the main idea, main message, or core of a literary work, okay? And the theme of this story you could have reached in the end after you've read stories after stories, okay? Or don't trust anyone easily, okay? So in any versions you've seen, you will see that it's about trusting someone. It's about meeting strangers and in the end, deciding if you could trust that stranger or not, okay? And also, danger is all around. So you see, Little Red Riding Hood, normally she would just go to see her grandmother. Nothing happened. But since Her journey involved the woods. See, you see the setting. Danger could lurk in the wood, not in the village, not in her grandmother's house, but in the woods. Okay, so danger is all around. And the characters, well, you've seen that already. You see Little Red Riding Hood, main characters, okay, just the main ones. Little Red Riding Hood and the wolf, okay. But in other versions, you might find the carpenter also who comes to rescue her. Who knows? And the minor characters, main ones are usually the one who has lines, the one who got to talk, the one who's got dialogues in the story. That are normally the main characters. The minor characters are mentioned, but not necessarily take part in the story. Okay, and these two are the mother and the grandmother. See, when you see a question, there are two terms that could refer to main characters. You could see the word protagonist and the word antagonist, okay? Normally, the main characters, it needs to involve at least one character as the main, who did the actions, who did the things they do in the stories. These are the protagonists, the one we root for, the one we hope can overcome these obstacles in the stories. The antagonists, or in other words, villains, okay? Villains, okay? The villains or the antagonist is the opposing force to the protagonist. When you read stories, normally in children's story, the antagonists have forms, are concrete. You can see this character, you can see the wolf. But in later stories, the antagonist could even be hidden, could be like, think of Sauron in The Lord of the Rings. Like, you have to read The Lord of the Rings until near the end that you actually see Sauron, okay? That you actually see like the one who owns the ring, okay? So, or there might not be any antagonist at all, because sometimes the protagonist fights fate, fights God, fights his own impulses. So not all stories have clear antagonists, okay? But at least all stories should have a protagonist. Now, protagonist, Little Red Riding Hood, like I said, and the antagonist is the wolf. Now, how does the antagonist oppose the protagonist? The verb here, okay? Oppose means how does the antagonist disrupt the story, disrupts Little Red Riding Hood's journey. See, this will not be a story if the Red Riding Hood successfully walked from home to see her grandmother and that's it, walk back home. Nothing happened. But oppose the protagonist how? Well, plan to eat her for sure. So if you are eaten, you can't deliver the goods to your grandmother, okay? Also, to kill her grandmother. And eat her, kill the grandmother, eat the protagonist. When there's no protagonist left, you can't continue the story, see? Okay, now where and when does a story take place? So these kind of questions, you might also see another format. It says, what is the setting of the story? Where and when can both be settings, okay? Where and when? Well, place is the Little Red Riding Hood's house, of course, the start of the story, in a jungle, or in this case, in the woods, okay, where you see the wolf. And lastly, the end, the grandmom's house. Time? Well, it actually happens in daytime, see? Even in daytime, you can find villains, you can find evil lurking in the woods, see? So that's why setting includes both place and time. And now reading between the lines. That's it, okay? But if you need to know more, you have seen this word before, the word symbol, the verb symbolize. These two involve the idea, the thought of symbolism, okay? The study about symbols. What does the wolf symbolize? If you read that section that I told you about, the one that says moral and then young female, young ladies, well, it's clear that the wolves symbolize those men who seems nice outside but actually preys upon or can bully, can hurt young women. Okay, and think about what does Little Red Riding Hood symbolize. What else? So questions that involve symbolism. You can also ask about the color used in this. So besides the character, wolf symbolize who? Little Red Riding Hood symbolize who or what? You can even ask about the color used here. Why Little Red Riding Hood, not Little Blue Riding Hood? See? What does the red signifies? So in order to answer this, there is no right or wrong answer. There's only a convincing answer or not. Okay? So if you say, okay, red looks like blood. Oh, what does blood signify? Blood could signify, oh, the gruesome ending that someone is eaten, blood, see? Or something. This is not like 18 plus content, okay? But the blood could also signify virginity's blood, okay? The blood that has never shed before, okay? So it depends, whatever you think red symbolizes, but you need to find evidence in the story at least or in the context of that story to support your claim, right? Wolf's teeth could be other things too, okay? So think about it, think on this. The reason I didn't put any answer here is because it's up to you, okay? You just have to support your answer, okay? Now, this is another version. The title is different, see? It's The Girl and the Wolf, not Little Red Riding Hood anymore. You've got both girl, both wolf, both girl and wolf here. And it's by James Thurber instead. This is quite short, that's why I can put this in the slide. So let's look at it together. One afternoon, a big wolf waited in a dark forest for a little girl to come along carrying a basket of food to her grandmother. Finally, a little girl did come along, and she was carrying a basket of food. Are you carrying that basket to your grandmother? Asked the wolf. The little girl said yes, she was. So the wolf asked her where her grandmother lived, and the little girl told him, and he disappeared into the wood. When the little girl opened the door of her grandmother's house, she saw that there was somebody in bed with a nightcap on. She had approached no nearer than 25 feet from the bed. See, that's quite a far distance, you know. When she saw that it was not her grandmother but the wolf, so she recognized immediately, see. For even in a nightcap, a wolf does not look any more like your grandmother than the Metro Goldwyn lion looks like Calvin Coolidge. So the little girl took an automatic out of her basket and shot the wolf dead. Moral: it is not so easy to fool little girls nowadays as it used to be. You see, this is shorter, more condensed, and has a twist in the end. See? It defies expectation, and it's also full of humor. See? No nearer than 25 feet. And also, there's a, here you see the comparison, right? We call this like to compare one thing that looks like another thing, right? This is simile, okay? S-I-M-I-L-E. We'll see later what is that, okay? You need to see the context first. You are the one who was born in 20th or 21st century, right? So you might not know what exactly is the Metro Goldwyn and who is Calvin Coolidge. It's all right. This is like a joke that the people at that time would understand, but you might not, okay? So that's one thing about jokes. Now, Little Girl and the Wolf, what have you learned from the tale? There's also a theme here. Well, the theme is, it's quite different, see, from the original one. The original one is, don't be too naive, right? Don't trust anyone easily, and danger is all around you. But this one's quite different. You see how the Little Red Riding Hood takes care of herself, right? She doesn't need anyone's help to protect her. That's why she protects herself. Nobody can protect you. Also, be careful before it's too late. You see how careful Little Red Riding Hood is, right? She doesn't approach the bed very closely. See, she waits like 20, she just stand apart 25 feet at least away from the bed because she's cautious, okay? That's why it's not too late to save herself. She can shot the wolf. Now, how does the little girl and the wolf differ from Little Red Riding Hood? You see the verb here, differ, adjective, different. See? So, what makes these two stories different to each other? Well, there's the contemporary issue, and also the girl's characteristics are different. Contemporary issue, you see the words they use, right? The issue here, because of the theme, it says girls now have to be able to take care of herself, see? Which is different from the image of like an innocent girl being preyed upon by guys in the 1900s, okay? Also a girl characteristic, which girl can shoot, especially American context, okay? Which girl knows how to use like guns anyway? Automatic here, imagine like that. Like in real life that would be hard, but at least she knows how to shoot a gun. Which is why it shows that literature reflects the society of its time. Because these two pieces of writing happened at different times, it's been retold in different times. So it speaks to the society of different times. The focus are different, things are different in the time here. Okay? Why? Look at this. The Charles Perrault version, the author lives in between 1628 to 1703, see? And he's French. And he laid the foundations for a new literary genre such as the fairy tale. So kind of like imagine that there normally like you have stories from Ubon Ratchathani, you have from Ayutthaya, from Phuket, from Rayong, right? These stories are scattered around the country. But Charles Perrault is the one who gathered all the story and put it, in one book and make it readable, make it easily understandable, okay? So he used the pre-existing folk tales, but to condense it and to gather it together, okay? But you can see the time here very different from nowadays. But the James Thurber version, you see, he was born in 1894 and he died in 1961. So much more contemporary. See? He's also American, which explains the existence of guns in the story. Okay? Author and cartoonist. And do you see another thing here? The classical one, it just said, okay, Little Red Riding Hood, do this. Does this, does that. The wolf said this, said that. And then he ate the girls. They are just list of actions, right? But for this version, you can see there's a sense of humor. So it also reflects the voice or the style of writing also. Because he's known for his cartoons, okay? So if you want to make cartoons, you need to be humorous. You need to have sense of humor and short stories. So he knows how to, instead of just writing pages and pages of stories, condense it to paragraph. Done. See? Short stories.